Captains Pierce and McIntyre to see you, sir.
Show them in.
Everyone remembers Radar O'Reilly the same way. The oversized army cap pulled down over his ears, the round wire-rimmed glasses, the teddy bear sitting on the footlocker beside his bunk, the way he could hear incoming helicopters before anyone else in the camp, sometimes before the sound was even audible to the human ear, and announce it in that flat Midwestern voice like he was reading from a grocery list. He was the mascot of the 4077th, the kid, the innocent, the one pure thing in a place designed to destroy everything pure. That version of Radar is real, and it is also the version that kept most viewers from seeing what was actually happening to him. Because if you go back through MASH with fresh eyes, if you stop watching Radar as a source of warmth and start watching him as a person living inside a specific and sustained set of pressures, something disturbing becomes visible. Radar O'Reilly was not doing fine, he was managing. There is a difference, and the show knows the difference even when the audience does not. The cheerfulness, the helpfulness, the eager hovering at the edge of every situation waiting to be needed, none of that is evidence of someone at peace. It is evidence of someone who has found a way to survive in an environment that should not have contained him at all. He was 17 when he first arrived at the 4077. 17. In a war zone, running logistics for a surgical unit that processed the mangled bodies of men not much older than himself, day after day, without rest and without end. Consider what that actually looks like. A teenager from a farm in Ottumwa, Iowa, who has never been further from home than the county line, dropped into a forward surgical camp in Korea and handed a clipboard and told to make the place function. And he did, without complaint, without visible breakdown, without once asking whether any of this was reasonable to ask of a 17-year-old. The show treats that fact gently. Most viewers absorb it gently. And that gentleness is exactly the problem, because gently absorbing it means never sitting with the full weight of what it means. A child performed the administrative functions of a military medical unit in an active war zone for years, and the narrative framing we were given made it feel charming rather than alarming. That says as much about how good Berghoff was at his job as it does about how thoroughly the show had trained us to look at Radar with warmth instead of clarity.
You wanted me to take those, sir?
Yeah.
Before we go any further, leave a comment and tell us the moment that broke your heart most when it came to Radar. Because I think a lot of people carry something about this character they have never quite had words for, and I suspect what comes next in this video will put words to some of it. Now here is the first discovery. Radar does not make friends at the 4077th. Not real ones. He has people he is devoted to, people he would do anything for, people whose needs he anticipates before they know they have them. But the relationship runs almost entirely in one direction. Hawkeye and Trapper enjoy Radar. They are fond of him. They use him constantly, not cruelly, but thoughtlessly, the way you use the person who always says yes. They call on him at all hours. They ask him to bend regulations and acquire impossible items and smooth over situations that are not his responsibility to smooth. And Radar does all of it, every time, without complaint. Watch the dynamic carefully across those early seasons. There are almost no scenes in which Radar is treated as a full participant in a conversation rather than a resource in it. He appears, he is given a task, he executes it with a competence that nobody takes a moment to acknowledge, and he disappears until the next thing is needed. The relationship Hawkeye and Trapper have with each other, that loose, easy, mutually sustaining friendship, does not include Radar. He orbits it. He enables it. He is never quite inside it. The show frames this as comedy. Radar's eagerness to please is played for warmth and occasional laughs. Nobody in the writer's room, I think, was consciously building a portrait of a young man whose emotional needs were going chronically unmet, but that is what they built, and it is there in every episode if you know what to look for. If deep dives like this are something you want to see regularly on this channel, subscribing takes about 2 seconds. We do this for the characters who deserved more attention than they got, and there is a lot more coming. Here is the contradiction at the center of Radar that the show almost never addresses directly. Radar is described throughout the series as psychic, or near enough. His ability to sense things before they happen, to know who is on the phone before picking it up, to hear helicopters at impossible distances is treated as a quirk, a running gag, something charming and slightly absurd. The other characters have long since stopped being surprised by it, but think about what it would actually be like to live that way. To be a person whose nervous system is operating at a pitch higher than everyone around him. To be someone who registers threats and arrivals and shifts in emotional atmosphere before they are visible to others. That is not a superpower. That is hypervigilance.
Ready, my patients back home. I keep in touch with each and every one of them. It's a pretty...
That is a nervous system trained by anxiety and necessity to scan constantly for danger and information, because the environment has made that scanning essential to survival. The show gives Radar his sensitivity as a gift, and it is a gift, but it is also a symptom. A person that attuned to the world around him is a person who cannot turn it off, who does not get quiet, who is always absorbing, always processing, always monitoring the state of the people around him and adjusting his behavior accordingly. And there is a word for that pattern when it appears in someone's psychology. There is a reason it develops, and it rarely develops in people who grew up feeling entirely safe. Here is what that looks like in practice if you know where in the show to look. Watch Radar in any scene where authority is being exercised in an unpredictable way. When generals arrive unexpectedly. When Frank Burns is in charge and using that charge to make the camp feel hostile. When some crisis arrives from outside the 4077th that nobody has prepared for. Watch what Radar's body does before anyone has said anything. He orients toward the disturbance. His attention shifts. His posture changes. He is already processing the threat assessment before the other characters have registered that something is wrong. The show treats this as the funny before it happens thing, the psychic bit. But what it looks like if you strip the comedy framing away is a young man who has been scanning for danger his entire life, who learned very early that being the first to know what was coming was how you stayed safe, who brought that vigilance to a war zone and found, perhaps for the first time,
Okay, hang on, I'll be right there.
I can give you a hand in a minute, McIntyre. Never mind.
that it was actually useful, that the thing his anxiety had been doing for years was suddenly an asset. And that is a deeply strange and specific kind of soldier to be. Now watch the teddy bear differently. The bear is named Roscoe. It sits beside Radar's bunk. It appears in episode after episode. The other characters know it is there, and they have long since stopped commenting on it. It is part of the furniture of the 4077th. And most viewers see it the same way. A sweet detail, a signal of Radar's innocence, a contrast between his youth and the adult horrors surrounding him. But Radar is not a child. He is a young man in his late teens and early 20s for most of the show's run. The bear is not a leftover from childhood he has not noticed yet. It is something he has deliberately held on to, something he has brought to a war zone and placed in plain sight and refused to be embarrassed about, in an environment where being vulnerable in any visible way is an invitation to be used. The bear is not innocence. The bear is defiance. It is Radar saying quietly and without words that he will not surrender the last piece of himself that the war has not yet taken. That is not childishness. That is a form of courage that the show consistently misreads as adorable. There is a young person in your life or in your memory who kept something like that. Something private they held onto in a situation that required them to grow up faster than anyone should have to. Watching Radar carry that bear through 11 seasons of a war zone hits differently when you understand what he is actually doing. There is a dimension of Radar's character that most analysis ignores entirely, and it is one of the clearest windows into who he actually is beneath the helpfulness. Radar's relationship with animals. It is not just that he likes them, he prefers them. In almost every episode where Radar has a genuine choice about where to spend his attention when he is not needed for something official, gravitates toward animals rather than people. He brings strays into the camp. He worries about the welfare of creatures the other characters barely notice. He speaks to animals with a directness and warmth that he almost never turns on the people around him. Think about what that preference tells you. Animals do not have authority over Radar. They do not ask him to bend regulations or acquire things or be available at 3 in the morning. They do not assess him. They do not need him to be competent or useful or invisible. They simply respond to him, warmly and without conditions.
I get on the humble meter.
And for a person whose every human relationship at the 4077th is structured around what he can provide, the straightforwardness of that response must have felt like oxygen. There is an episode where a wounded animal comes into the camp, and Radar's reaction is completely disproportionate to how the other characters experience the situation. He is distressed in a way that breaks through his usual careful management of his own emotions. He advocates loudly. He refuses to accept the outcome the situation seems to be heading toward. And he is, briefly, the most unguarded version of himself the show ever puts on screen. Not because the animal matters more than the people, but because with the animal, Radar does not have to be careful. He does not have to calculate what reaction is appropriate or useful or welcome. He just feels what he feels and responds to it. And watching him do that, watching the performance of competent neutrality fall away for a few minutes, You understand exactly what he has been suppressing every other time the camera has been on him. Here is the discovery that changes the entire shape of the character. Radar is terrified of the operating room, not squeamish in a casual way, genuinely, visibly disturbed by it. The surgical theater where Hawkeye and Trapper and later BJ perform miracles on broken men represents the outer limit of what Radar can absorb. He can hear the helicopters, he can process the intake, he can manage every administrative function that surrounds the medical work. But the work itself, the blood and the opened bodies and the reality of what a war does to a person at the cellular level, he cannot look at it directly. He flinches away from it. He excuses himself. He finds reasons to be elsewhere. This is played occasionally for gentle comedy. Radar's weak stomach, his inability to handle gore. It is treated as part of the same package as the bear and the animal fondness and the Iowa farm boy gentleness. But Radar sees the aftermath every single day. He processes casualties. He handles the paperwork of death with the same quiet efficiency he brings to everything. He knows exactly what is happening in that operating room, what it produces, what it costs. His flinching is not ignorance. It is the last boundary he has maintained, the one thing he has refused to let become normal. And the fact that he has held that boundary for years, in a place where holding any boundary requires constant effort, says something about him that the show treats as weakness and is actually the opposite. Now here is the relationship that sits at the very center of Radar's emotional story, and it is the one that most rewards careful watching. Radar idolizes Hawkeye, not in the way a fan idolizes a celebrity, in the way a younger brother idolizes an older one. He watches Hawkeye with a kind of reverent attention that the show occasionally notices and more often takes for granted.
Sir, I have sipped, lapped, and taken gin intravenously, but I have never...
He adopts Hawkeye's opinions. He echoes Hawkeye's humor, imperfectly, in a way that is both sweet and slightly painful because it is so clearly imitation rather than instinct. He organizes his understanding of the world around what Hawkeye thinks about it. And Hawkeye, who is genuinely fond of Radar and would describe him without hesitation as someone he cares about, does not fully see this. He sees a useful kid who is also charming. He sees someone to protect and occasionally to deploy. He does not register the scale of what Radar is doing when he looks at Hawkeye, the amount of meaning he is placing there, the work he is doing to keep himself anchored to someone rather than simply adrift in a war zone with no fixed points at all. There are moments where Hawkeye does something careless in Radar's presence. Not cruel, just careless. The kind of casual thoughtlessness that brilliant, self-absorbed people are prone to. And the camera, if you are watching, Radar rather than Hawkeye in those moments catches something in Radar's face that passes quickly. A small adjustment. A flicker of something that is absorbed and smoothed over before it can be called disappointment. He recalibrates. He continues. He does not mention it. That pattern across all those seasons adds up to something the show never explicitly dramatizes, but that is absolutely present if you look for it. A young man who attached himself to an imperfect anchor and held on anyway, because the alternative was to have nothing to hold on to at all. Here is where the Radar story becomes genuinely painful. There is a pattern that runs through every season of the show involving Radar and home. Iowa is everywhere in his inner life. He writes letters to his mother, he talks about the farm, he describes his Uncle Ed and the animals and the particular smell of the air in Ottawa in summer in a way that makes you understand that home is not just where he is from, it is what he is made of. He is running on it. The way a generator runs on fuel, Radar runs on his memory of Iowa, and that memory is slowly being used up. Watch him in the middle seasons, around seasons 5 and 6, and compare him to the Radar of the early episodes. Something has shifted. The eagerness is still there, the helpfulness is still there. But there is a quality to the early Radar that is genuinely light, a buoyancy. And by the middle of the run, the buoyancy is being replaced by something more effortful. He is working harder to be the same person. The cheerfulness is costing him more than it used to.
Something about this. Frank will report it to Hammond and he'll put my button traction.
The show does not dramatize this. There is no episode where Radar sits down and explains that he is deteriorating. It is there in the texture of Gary Berghoff's performance if you look for it. A gradual, almost imperceptible heaviness settling in beneath the familiar surface. A man who started the war with reserves and is watching them run low. And here is something about Berghoff himself that changes the entire texture of what you are watching. Gary Berghoff has spoken openly in interviews about the challenges he experienced during the run of MASH. The character's emotional openness was not for him a professional tool he could pick up and put down between takes. He found the separation between himself and Radar genuinely difficult. He poured something real into the role in a way that left him personally exposed, and the more the show required of Radar emotionally, the more it required of Berghoff. Berghoff also has a physical characteristic that most viewers have never noticed, because the show was careful to conceal it and he was careful to manage it. His left hand has malformed fingers, a condition present from birth that he kept largely out of frame across all 11 seasons. He never made it a topic of discussion. He never asked for accommodation beyond the discreet camera angles the production provided. He handled it with the same quiet, private management that Radar himself brought to everything he was carrying. The parallel is almost too precise. A man who held something private for years, who performed normalcy around something real, who asked for nothing and said nothing and just kept showing up. Berghoff was not acting Radar from the outside. He was channeling something he already knew from the inside. When he left the show after season 8, citing exhaustion and a desire to return to his family, both things were true. And both of them were also Radar's reasons. The character and the actor had arrived at the same wall at the same time. Now here is the relationship that most fans point to as evidence that Radar was loved, and what it actually reveals when you look at it carefully. Potter, Colonel Sherman T. Potter, who arrives in season 4 and almost immediately recognizes something in Radar that the previous commanding officers had not fully registered. Potter treats Radar differently. He speaks to him differently. There is a respect in the way Potter addresses Radar that Radar has almost never encountered from someone in authority at the 4077th, and you can see him responding to it with something that looks like relief. But here is the problem. Potter's recognition of Radar is genuine, and it is not enough, because Potter recognizes Radar the way a good manager recognizes a valuable employee. He sees the competence, he appreciates the reliability, he is kinder about it than most, and he is protective in ways that matter. But he does not see the cost. He sees what Radar produces, not what producing it takes from him. And because Radar never complains, because Radar has built an entire personality around not being a burden, Potter has no way to know what is not being shown. Radar trusts Potter. That trust is one of the warmest and most genuine things in the entire series. And it is still not enough to fix what is happening to Radar, because trust without disclosure does not actually let anyone help you. It just gives you someone to stand near while you quietly come apart. Here is the most overlooked story beat in Radar's entire arc.
At 4 o'clock, they have what's known as the Chimps Tea Party. The MASH equivalent is our monthly staff meeting.
There is a point in the later seasons where Radar is given leave to go back to Iowa. He goes home. He sees the farm and his mother and the world he has been running on for years. And when he comes back, he is not better. He is worse, because going home revealed something he had been protecting himself from knowing. That the home he had been holding in his memory, the version of it that had kept him functional in Korea, was not entirely real anymore. Time had moved. Things had changed. The farm was still there, but it was not the same farm because he was not the same person who had left it, and the gap between the memory and the reality is one of the most disorienting things a person can experience. He comes back to the 4077th. He puts on his cap, he picks up his clipboard, and he continues. That is the most devastating thing about Radar O'Reilly. Not any single dramatic moment. Not the goodbye scene, which is genuinely wrenching, but the pattern underneath it. A young man who came to a war with one source of nourishment, one thing that kept him going, and watched that thing slowly become insufficient, who never complained about it, who never asked for what he needed, who kept showing up and kept performing competence and kept being the person everyone else needed him to be, until he couldn't. His departure from the show in season 8 is framed as a choice. He is going home, his uncle died, the farm needs him, and these are real reasons. But watch the scene of his departure again, knowing what you know now. Watch the way he moves through the camp, saying goodbye to people who have needed him for years and who are, in this moment, genuinely sad to lose him. They are sad because they need him. They are sad because he makes things run. They are sad because they are fond of him. But almost none of them have understood across all those years what it cost him to be what they needed. Potter knows. Potter comes close to knowing. The goodbye between them is the most emotionally complete scene of Radar's entire arc, and it is still not quite enough. Radar climbs into the Jeep. He is wearing his cap, he has his bag, and then something happens that Gary Berghoff plays with an exactness that is almost impossible to describe. For just a moment before the Jeep moves, before he leaves for good, Radar looks back at the camp, and his face does something that is not quite relief and not quite grief. It is something in between those things. The expression of a person who has finally been allowed to stop carrying something they were never strong enough to carry and never admitted it. You have seen that expression before, maybe not on a television screen, maybe on the face of someone you know or someone you used to know, the moment they finally stopped doing something the world had required of them without ever asking if they were capable of it, the moment the requirement lifted. And the thing on their face was not pure happiness because carrying it had become part of who they were, and putting it down meant being for a while someone they did not quite recognize.
Make sure nobody steals it down there, huh?
That is Radar in the Jeep, 17 years old when he arrived, years older than that in ways that had nothing to do with his birth certificate when he left. He was the most beloved person in that camp. He was also the loneliest. Not because no one cared about him, but because the way they cared was always about what he gave them rather than who he was. And Radar, who could hear helicopters from miles away, who could sense emotional shifts before they were visible, who was attuned to everything happening around him at a frequency the other characters could not access, never once signaled clearly that he was the one who needed someone to listen. Maybe he did not know how. Maybe he had never had the chance to learn. The bear was in his bag when he left. Of course it was. If there is a character you want us to look at next, leave it in the comments below. We read all of them.